Resources Committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Glad you could join us. We will, as we do, go around the room and introduce the committee members who are present so that you know who you're meeting with. And can we start with you, Tom?
Tom Caranzini, Rutland Town.
Matt Hill from Wolcott.
Chris Bates, Bennington, 2-1.
Trevor Squirrel, Underhill of Jericho.
Amy Sheldon, Middlebury.
Paul LaFave, Newark.
Lee Morgan, Grand Isle County and West Milton.
And right now we're missing a couple members for medical reasons and expect a couple more to join us any minute, I hope. So we left off with you at the end of last session, and since that time we have some modifications to our proposal. I think you've had a chance to look at them and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. And I just want to thank the committee for having me back. And for the record, I am Mark Hughes. I'm Executive Director of Justice for All, Vermont-based racial justice organization. Justice for All is the anchor organization of the Racial Justice Reform, the Racial Justice Alliance, rather. And I want to just go straight into the document, if that's okay. And Madam Chair, I also would like to ask permission to stick around and hear the testimony of the Executive Director of Racial Equity after I drop off.
Our committee assistant said, mentioned that to me, and that's great. Sure.
Thank you. I have just a few thoughts about where we are and what we're doing and why we're doing it. I just wanted to just drop a couple of reminders, and maybe some of this might be some new information. We've been digging around some numbers. We're seeing that numbers of home ownership for blacks in this state are somewhere down around 16 or 17%, and maybe just barely over 71% for white folks. We see black farmers decline and black land ownership on a decline as well. Some of these are also national numbers. So definitely following up from some of the work that we completed with Act 54, racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice system advisory panel, and specifically from the Attorney General's and Human Rights Commission's task force in a report that was issued by then Karen Richards and David Scher, indicating racial disparities in housing, in education, employment, health services access, as well as economic development. We also know and understand that the median wealth of blacks in America is about 1/13 that of whites in America. So we're working really hard. Very proud to have come to a point as a state where we've made the statement and are doing the work. And I think that's also evidenced by the new racial equity director, as well as the panel that's assisting Savannah in getting the work done. I'm happy to continue to do this work as well. I'm really excited to do it with you. Before I go into this next piece here, I just wanted to stress and emphasize something that that we haven't really covered, and I'm not quite sure how we would go about incorporating it. But I do know that data collection is going to be really important in the work, increasingly important in the work that we're doing, the work that all of us are doing. I know that it's come up in various areas across the criminal justice system as we're working with our justice reinvestment. I know that there is plenty of talk about it across various other areas. Research from a report from the working group of experts of people of African descent on its 23rd and 24th session with the General Assembly of the United Nations also stressed. The working group encouraged that, quote, the disaggregation of official data by race, including for census data, household surveys, and vital statistics, including the Eurostat and other official statistics of collection programs, is important. So very, very important. I think that's something that it's better to capture on the front end instead of trying to recover on the back end. To the policy, I want to go directly into the section 6021 on board vacancies. And just to kind of speed this process up a little bit, I will speak on section 6026 at the same time. So I believe these are two sections that we spoke about the last time I visited you, one concerning the board vacancy and removal, and the other concerning district commissioners. And I believe where we were was a concern because this essentially is the infrastructure of the entire Act 250 program. The appointment here of the board, as well as all of the commissioners in the various districts across the state, all in some way or another being appointed by the governor. Clearly, concerns, as we take a closer look at systemic racism and unpacking what that really means and what that looks like is essentially people's political and economic power placing other people in positions of political and economic power who are making decisions about the lives of other folks. And I think that the challenge there is statistically what we'll find is probably about 99 times out of 100 when we have the ability to choose someone, whether it's a job, appointment, or whatever, we have a tendency to choose people that are quite a bit like us. So I see that I really want to applaud the work that has gone into this because it looks as though that there is at least a pivot in 6021 to suggest that I think the criteria would be by which they would be confirmed in a manner of a superior judge. Although I guess from the knowledge that I have about that process, I believe that what that is a Senate appointment. But at the end of the day, those recommendations are still approved by the governor, if I'm not mistaken. It sounds like it almost looks like a little bit more of the same, but I'm not quite sure that actually does it. As far as the district commissioners are concerned, it looks like there was some language that was inserted: racial, ethnic, gender, geographic diversity, and so forth. I believe there's 3 seats in each district, and then there's 4 alternates. So it sounds like it's going to be highly discretionary, and that's basically the governor's going to be making some decisions about continuing to make decisions about a whole group of folks that essentially make up the infrastructure of the entire program. So I think that's kind of troubling, and I think that as we drill a little deeper in dismantling systemic racism in the work that we're doing, we're going to find increasingly that policy, training, appointment processes, also policy impact analysis, existing and emerging, as well as data collection. These components are going to be very important. And so where we are right now, this is just a really solid upfront conversation about the appointment process and how it could be contributing to the perpetuation of a systemically racist program in terms of this, the implementation of Act 250. It could be. Let's move quickly over to 6086.
Mark,
And
hold on. One second. There's someone with a question. Representative Squirrel has a question.
Sorry about that. I'm
All right.
glad to take a question.
It's okay, you can't see my hand up. Mark, you point out potential issues and problems. But do you have a recommendation for solution or options, proposals?
I do. I'm sorry. I'm wondering if I didn't send that over. I didn't. So what we've done in other in other areas is that I've recommended that some of that that appointment authority just simply be delegated or relegated over to the legislature or else over to the judiciary. So what you'll see in some of the emerging policy is that the committee on committees will make an appointment. The speaker will make an appointment. Maybe the chief superior judge will make an appointment, and so forth.
Yeah, my apologies if you spoke to it earlier. I must have missed it.
I may not have. I don't. My apologies if I didn't. Thank you. Other questions before we move?
I don't see any.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So over to 6086. This is the. Let me just get that in front of me really quickly here.
And which version of our bill are you looking at?
I was looking at 3 separate things that Mark sent over to me. In one, this is the last email that I received from him that took me to your amendment, another version of the bill, and this version of the bill happens to be draft 9.2.
Okay.
I apologize for that. There may have been another one that came out that I didn't catch here in the last minute.
Well, it's hot off the press today, so we didn't expect you to have it. So we're fine.
Oh, you mean I have the most current one?
No, we have another one that is more recent, but we just got it today. So.
Oh, you almost made me feel special there.
Sorry. Of course you're special.
So I'm going to go back to 6086. And that's the issuance of permits and conditions and criteria. And one of the things that I was trying to get at there is trying to, for lack of better terms, how can we level a playing field? How can we create some kind of fail-safe in there to offer some I guess racial and equity and diversity type of criteria. And I think I was really pleased in the recommendation that I offered last year. It was really just like bullets I put in there. And what I was really trying to get at is if there was a criteria in there that ensured that that in a review, and this is kind of like an ongoing review. It's kind of like more like an embedded racial equity review, or I should say, an embedded racial equity step in the process, if you will, for lack of better terms. One of the criteria that one would need to review is this creating any inequities in land ownership and distribution? Is this creating disproportionate environmental impact? Is this limiting the access to any area of the state disproportionately? Is this creating any limitation that excludes from a racial perspective or something like that? So I offered those out as just for your consideration. If you cared to incorporate some kind of language in the criteria in the review process that will have an embedded fail-safe for the diversity, equity, and inclusion, as opposed to what would the option be? The alternative would be to, perhaps have a every decision being reviewed by a person or something like that, which is really unwieldy and just not manageable. I mean, realistically, it doesn't seem as though that would be the case. But if we were to embed some language into the policy that just provided that step, if you will, that would need to be taken before anything goes out the door, then maybe this might be a viable solution.
Yeah, so I'm gonna.
I'll wait for your questions on that.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that in our latest draft 10.4, we put in an environmental justice criteria, and it's if you have that available, it's page 58 of the latest draft, 10.4.
Mhm.
And it is, I think it's fair to say, and my legal counsel is here with me, and so she'll correct me if I'm wrong, that we based it on a definition we got from the EPA, and
Mhm.
and this is a little unfair, so you may need to say you'll get back to us on this, but you know, when we add a new criteria, this one's pretty different from other criteria that, in that there's an accepted standard or understanding of how to show that you're meeting the criteria. And we're wondering about how we would be how an applicant would be able to demonstrate that they met a criteria like this. So that's I don't, yeah.
Could you tell me where that, I did read that somewhere today.
It's in
I'm trying to remember where I saw that.
It's
I
on.
sent in your proposal, the district commission proposal, so it's on page 15 and
Is
16.
that in your,
The shorter one, it's in the
latest,
the
was
short
that
one.
also in your proposal?
Oh, it's lead counsel just told me it's on page 1516 of the Sheldon amendment,
Yes.
so-called, that I think you have.
That's where I read it. I have it in front of me now. And yes, I did think that was a fair definition. In fact, I went and I was kind of taken back by it, and then I went and looked it up, and it was verbatim. So that would, I think that particular what I'm reading in 6001 is just offered as a definition.
Yeah, there's a definition and then a related criteria.
Then down, so your criteria is out of context in your amendment document. I wouldn't be able to see it, but I would imagine it's just listed as it within the criteria section where we're bumping around in right now. And yeah, I think that would, if you recall, just back a moment ago when I was rattling a few things off, one thing I said was inequities in land ownership and distribution. And then the next one I said was disproportionate environmental impact. And I think that this language on this final draft, this really speaks to that quite effectively. We haven't really addressed inequities, because we're dealing with a few things here. One is obviously, we don't want anything environmentally to adversely impact any particular demographic any worse than others. In fact, if it was all of our choice, we wouldn't have any adverse impact environmentally on anyone. But certainly we don't want it to be unfair in that way. And I think, again, this language certainly addresses that. But there is another dimension of the work that we're doing, and that is to address inequities in land ownership in general. And certainly that I would think everyone at the table would agree that would be a pretty decent criteria to achieve that, is to make sure that land is not being owned unfairly, disproportionately.
I'm not sure how would that fit into a review of a development. Maybe I'm not fully understanding.
Well, I think that what I'm really getting at is I'm looking for a way in which we can be able to take a look at a review and find out whether or not the process was fair.
Yes. Okay.
So, as far as specific recommendations on this one, I'd have to take your advice and go away and think about it.
Okay, that's fair. We'll take your point and go away and think about it as well.
And I think that there's the other two. These are the other two I would ask you to think about as well. Are our processes or are our policies creating limitations across the state in any way in terms of land access? And are our policies limiting diversity in general across the state in terms of land access? So if we were able to, wrestle that one down and figure out how do we articulate that in such a way where it could be incorporated in a conditions and criteria for issuance of permits, that would be a good thing. But I think I'd like to take your advice and go away and think more about those. But it does seem as though that we've gotten some language out on one of them, and it's looking pretty good. The question is how does that become operational?
Yep. We have a question from Representative Dolan, who has joined us since we did introductions.
Good afternoon, I'm
Hi,
sorry.
Representative Dole.
Good afternoon, I apologize for being a tad late here, but thank you for coming. My question is in regards to that definition, and I do appreciate the work of our council in finding that through the Environmental Protection Agency's use of that term, environmental justice. But I also noted, to get to your point about whether there's an opportunity to kind of think more broadly about what we mean and how we would apply environmental justice criteria. I started looking at where else do we, is there working definitions of this term even beyond the scope of Environmental Protection Agency, and I point to Columbia University's choice of the term, where they talk about having the right to equal environmental protection under the law and the right to live, work, and play in communities that are safe, healthy, and free of life-threatening conditions. And perhaps this gets to some of the land use issues that you were talking about. And I flag that as we think about a working definition, that that might be a good source of information for us.
I really appreciate that, and I too did some digging around, and I think it is something difficult to get one's head around. I know there's a Superfund site right here in Burlington, and there is the there's the Champlain Parkway that's been coming in for the last 50 years, and there was a diversion proposal that went into that parkway that causes that parkway because no one will touch that Superfund site. And for those familiar with Burlington, the parkway is, you look over 189 when you come into Sheldon, is it Sheldon? Yeah, when you come into Shelburne Road. There's a road down below you when you get off the on-ramp that's never been used. We call it the road that goes nowhere. And if you understand Burlington, you'll know that road is going in the direction of Home and Flynn, and that's going down towards downtown, and there's two other segments that's supposed to be built there. And they chose to bump that up to Pine Street, the route, and then go through Maple and Maple and King Street area. For those who know this area, that's the second most diverse area in the city of Burlington. So that creates, all of the challenges that go with, a parkway coming through one's neighborhood. The values of the homes, the safety of our children, the pollution associated with it, and all of that other stuff. All because there was a Superfund site there because somebody profited off of that, having a business there earlier. So there's a real life example of environmental justice and where it's working and where it's not working. And I think, as we start talking about how these permits or how these laws work in terms of allowing folks to proceed on projects like that, those are some of the real live examples that we would want to be mindful of to see whether or not we can create fail-safes within our processes to preclude things like that from occurring.
We have another. Oh, are you finished? Sorry, we have another question when you're ready.
Sure, absolutely.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for. It's Representative LaFave from Newark, and I'm curious to know if you know anything about the Brunswick Springs, which was deal to the Abenaks, the Mohegan tribe, the band, in right on the Connecticut River, in the town of Brunswick. It was the site of a former hotel and it was a spa. It has something like several different mineral springs that people used to go and take the waters. And over the years, one tragedy after another kind of dogged it, and it was acquired through a gift by the Abenakis, the tribe of the Mohegan branch, I believe. And I'm just wondering if you know anything about that, or if there's any attempt to kind of try to develop the land and try to use it in a way that would be either interpretive as far as Native American culture goes, or anything along those lines.
I don't. That sounds like something that we all should know something about. So, and I'd welcome anything that you could send me over to send me on the chase. And if you'd allow me to do that, I'll be happy to report back to the entire committee on that.
Okay, thank you. I'll certainly mention that we had some. Don Stevens, are you aware of him?
Yes, I know Don.
Yeah,
I know Don well.
I think he knows about it. He might be a good guy to consult with.
He's kind of the guy I had in the back of my head. He's my go-to guy. In the work we do, I think some of us just get worn out. I apologized to him one day for asking him so many questions, you know. He's a good man. Other questions?
No, I think we're good. So,
hopefully there's a place down on the document that you have in front of you that goes into a section called 4348A.
okay.
They talk about land use elements. And this is somewhat obscure a little bit, not completely, but was kicking around the whole idea of land use, and there are categories of land use elements. Please let me know if you're in the area where I'm looking right now.
Are you looking at something in our bill? Or
Yes.
is it a reference in our bill, or is it actual language?
Some language, it speaks to, is it 4348 or something like that?
Well, yeah, so, under criterion 10, there's a reference to 4348.
Does it talk about land use elements?
Well, yeah, local and regional plans. Do you know? Ellen?
Yeah, Ellen Tchaikovsky. 24 VSA 4348 relates to municipal and regional planning. Yep.
Is it in our bill? Is it in our bill?
You
There's a
amend.
reference here, but I don't.
You amend section 4348 F on page 72 of the new draft. And then also on page 73. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I think we're with you now, Mark.
Yeah, there was a reference to 4348A, and it was talking about the various categories of land use. This is going somewhere else, but it occurred to me in a recent conversation, that many other states are moving to a model where there is a cultural land use as a element designation. And I just wanted to speak to that very, very briefly. There's a lot of indigenous interest, African American indigenous, Native American indigenous interest in establishing, constructs, even to the extent that we would even envision trusts to create ecosystems that are self-sustaining. And I think that I just wanted to kind of plant a seed for the group because there are some very creative things that are happening across the country in the area of land use, not just from a preservation perspective or an agricultural perspective, but also from a cultural perspective. So I'll just leave that as a bookmark there. It's just something that I ran across. And moving, if there's no questions there, I will just go over to the development cabinet.
Yeah, hold on one second. I actually have a question. So are you saying that,
Sure.
that other jurisdictions are starting to have a cultural land use, like category? Is that,
Yes.
okay. Huh. Interesting. Okay, thank you for that nugget, that seed. Okay,
Yeah.
development cabinet, yes. I thought we deleted.
Development cabinet, 2293. Are we at 2293?
Okay, we may have deleted the development cabinet because in the time we've been working on the bill, the legislature deleted the development cabinet because they hadn't been meeting.
Oh, that's a good reason.
Yeah, but I don't think that necessarily means your comment is not relevant. So if it is still relevant, let us know.
Yeah, I'll skip over it. If there's no development cabinet, we don't really have much to talk about.
Okay.
I'm gonna conclude with go back. I want to go down to section 18, impact on racial equity and diversity review, and this speaks to the executive director of racial equity, inequities, and the language goes on and it trails into inequities in land distribution. I think that's item number 1, folks there.
Okay, we're turning to that page. We were just told by
It
our.
may be section 18 in the new version. It may not be.
Yeah,
It's the very end of the bill.
Yes, it is still section 18, and it's on page 99 for what that's worth of the new draft.
Oh boy. If it's still section 1, there's a sentence that starts and it goes on into, it says inequities in land distribution or something like that.
Land ownership and land distribution. Yep.
Right. And the only point I wanted to make there is that, if I'm not mistaken, and help me out here because this could be a good learning moment for me, is that we might want to be talking about land ownership and distribution, but also home ownership as well.
Okay.
So I wonder, is that something that has come up? I'll wait for a response on that.
It hasn't yet, but we're still we're going to walk through this draft this week.
Okay.
And you had at the beginning of this testimony numbers of home ownership at 17% and 71%. Was that in Vermont?
I saw that number somewhere.
Oh, so I was wondering if that was, you said then some of your statistics might be national. Was that Vermont or was that national?
I think that was Vermont.
Okay.
Let me see if I can go. I'm making a note on that. Let me see if I can go back and find where I got that number from and get it over to you.
That'd be great. That would be helpful.
The other thing beneath that is the and this is just, again, I think this is really, I think it belongs here as one of the I guess there are several. Let me just get to that portion of at least my version of what we're looking at. So we have the racial equity director, the executive director, is looking into a number of things here. Identifying impacts, measuring extent, assessing capabilities, so on and so forth, recommending changes. And there is one thing I'd really love to get wrestled down, and I don't know if we can do it, but it's the extent to which Act 250 contributes to the overall lack of diversity statewide.
Okay.
So it sounds kind of scary, but I think it's certainly something. I mean, I remember the VPR radio segment. They'd ask a question, but why, or something like that. And the question is, why is there hardly any black people in Vermont? And I think everybody's been wrestling with that, and I think it's a combination of a lot of things, and this might be one of them. If we have the ability to get to the bottom of that, and I'm going to take you all the way back to the top of our conversation because it's all about data. Then I think we owe it to ourselves to do it. Questions on that one?
Well, I just want to make sure I captured what you said. I think you said assess the extent to which Act 250 has contributed to a lack of racial
Lack of-
diversity?
Yes,
Okay.
statewide. If in the last two words are, if any. Just to be clear. Other questions?
No, that's great. It's very helpful. I think we need to move to the next witness, which
Sure. Well, I really want to thank you for inviting me to testify. I want to thank the committee for the hard work that you do. Madam Chair, I do appreciate the hard work that you do as well. And wish you guys a great session. I'm going to hang out and listen to the next witness.
great. Thank you for your testimony today. We have
Thank you for having me.
Susanna?
Susanna.
Susanna.